Night owls and revelers. BIOB and buckle up for After Hours Live, the show that turns Monday from ugh to hells, yeah. We're cranking up the heat with current event stories that sizzle, high strangeness that'll make you say, what the? And a no-holds-barred approach to topics so vulgar and foul, they'd make a sailor blush. Get ready to laugh, facepalm, and maybe even spit out your drink, just a little, as we dive into the absurd, the unbelievable, and the downright scandalous. We're not just a one-person act. We're rolling out the red carpet for friends, fellow podcasters, and anyone who's got a bone to pick or a story to spill. Share in the bitch fest, air your grievances, or just come to hear what the buzz is all about. Don't let your Monday nights be a snooze fest. Say goodbye to lackluster evenings and hello to a riot of a time with us on After Hours Live. Because who said Mondays have to be mundane? Join us if you dare for a hell of a time.
Make sure to catch up on our first 3 episodes. They're all available on YouTube now. Don't forget to subscribe to Studio Sinister Podcast, your go-to for After Hours Live and Uncut. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when we go live. And guess what? Our next show is coming up soon. Mark your calendars for July 1st at 8 p.m. Central Time. We are joined again by the dynamic duo Leslie and Stephen Shaw. And this time, my best friend is here to join us, Courtney, co-host of the show. I'm so glad that you're here for this one. And Leslie, Stephen, thank you again so much for coming on for part 2. So how has everybody been, and where would you like to start back up?
When I was just still 16, I was involved with my father, who was a master cabinet maker, and I was a cabinet maker at the time too. We spent 2 weeks on Avalon, which is the city of, main city of Catalina Island. If you're familiar with the West Coast, it's 26 miles across the sea. Santa Catalina is the place to see. Anyway, we were remodeling what was called the Folly Hill House, which was now, at that point in 1976, was owned by Victor Kreis, who we did a lot of work for. He was a multimillionaire and a really nice guy. But anyway, we were redoing the cupola, which is the overhead structure at the top of the house. It was like a 4-story house. It was one of the 2 or 3 landmarks in Avalon, and it had been badly damaged and not taken care of. And he spent a lot of money remodeling it. There was a whole story behind that went back over 100 years. But anyway, so
the house was protected by the town, had it. What's like a historic landmark, but they didn't have the money to put into it to fix it. So this millionaire that always loved it came along and said he made it. He bought it with the town to make sure to fix it.
He bought it and remodeled it. My dad and I, we got the job. My dad, this particular day, he was working on the cupola, which is the top of the house, and I was working in the downstairs kitchen. So I started redoing some of the cabinets, and I was listening to a tape of the group Chicago.
Oh, I love Chicago.
And the song "Feeling Stronger Every Day" just happened to be playing. So anyways, I'm working on this kitchen, and I see this woman.
First it went cold, remember?
Oh yeah, first I got this cold sensation, little cold sensation, and which I thought was weird because it was summer. And I saw this woman dressed in, like I call them, old-timey clothes, with this, it's kind of blackish curly hair and, probably medium height. And she just went by the back door, which was a window door combination, so I could see her upper torso. And she just looked at me with this dead stare, annoyed, staring daggers at me, saying,
What are you doing here?
What are you doing in my kitchen listening to that outlandish music?
Yeah.
And I immediately, I thought, this is like a trespass or something. So I immediately got up and I ran out the door to go see where, who she was and what was going on. And there was nothing there. And there was no place for her to hide. And she was definitely a hell of a lot older than me.
And she didn't so much walk by the window. She just went like
wide,
steady and even, like she was, like when we walk.
She wasn't going like
it's more like a float.
Like a float. And so I always remembered the way she looked. And so Leslie and I started doing some research, and we were able to hunt down some pictures, and we were able to hunt down the picture.
There was only one woman who ever lived in the house for any appreciable amount of time. And the Giddings family owned it from
1921
to
61.
Wow. So 40 years. And it was like their summer cottage where they lived in Pasadena. There were wealthy Pasadena people, and they bought the house and used it for summer retreats and stuff. And her name was Jenny H. Giddings, and that's where the house gets its name, the H. Her maiden name was Hollingsworth.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So they
The
renamed
Folly
the
House.
house the Holly House. It was
Oh,
before that.
all right. I get
was-
that.
It was the Lookout Cottage or something like that.
Yeah, from the guy who
Mhm.
built it for his sweetheart.
Yeah, but it's an enormous house, so cottage doesn't really apply somehow.
Mr. Christ, he made this whole booklet of the history of the Holly House that I happen to still have a copy of.
Yeah, so we had
And-
pictures of it. We put it on Instagram.
Yeah, it's on the Instagram. We have pictures of the kitchen I was working on, pictures of the cupola. And I said, I know. So anyway, I found a picture of a book that she published back years and years ago of the history of the
Pasadena Society.
the Hollingsworth house of the family in Pasadena. And sure enough, the picture they have of her is the woman.
It's the woman.
It's the woman who floated by.
Oh,
by,
cool.
It
walked
was-
by, yeah.
It's one of these things I had almost forgotten about because it happened like when I was 15, almost 16. But I thought, you know what? It's legitimate. And I told my dad about it and didn't know what to think about it.
Mhm.
And then a
Did
couple
she
years
look
later was
as real as you and I,
Uh-huh.
Stephen?
Except black and white,
yeah, that's just the
Ooh.
other thing too. She looked black and white.
Yeah.
almost like a photograph of a woman.
Yeah, she looked black and white. She didn't have any color on as far as it was just basically
Interesting.
black and white garb, but old
Yeah.
fashioned.
That kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of I don't know if you've seen the movie 1408, the way that they have them like kind of the
No.
ghosts in that movie are like almost like they're black and white picture films, the way that
Yeah,
they
I'm-
go
Oh,
through.
yeah.
I
It-
have watched that, Courtney. That's a great movie, by the way.
I love that movie.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a Stephen King
It's-
movie, isn't it?
Yeah, so he has a short story about the Dolphin Hotel 1408, and then they made a whole movie out of it. But yeah, that's how they're like
I know
depicted
exactly
in
what
that
you're
film.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
It
Interesting.
sounds
Interesting.
like definitely a connection.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it was partly the look that she gave me. It's almost like she
Like,
was
yeah.
aghast, and also like confused, and also a little bit ticked off. It was
Mhm.
like one of these looks.
How are you doing
And
in
that's
my
and
kitchen?
that's
Yeah.
the reason. That's one of the reasons why I got up and I ran out. Since
Tell us the
you know,
music. She wouldn't have known
what
anything
the-
about rock and
why-
roll.
why are you
Right.
mad at me? Why are you mad at me? And also too, like, why are you wearing these like clothes from the 20s?
Yeah.
In the 40s, it's like it was very odd. But again, like I say, I came from a family that oddity was the
Yeah, it's
normal
sort of
thing.
that. Oh, another
So-
one.
Another day of something weird.
Strange happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't happen every day, but
So it
Yeah.
didn't startle you as much as it would the
No.
normal person
Yeah.
who's a skeptic
No,
about
it
ghosts and
didn't.
it's not in their family.
no.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
Yeah.
just another, like Leslie said, just another day for you, another odd instance, and you just roll with it and figure it out. It's awesome how you guys look that up too to
Yeah.
find more information.
The internet is
On it.
wonderful.
I
you
was,
know?
It's
I was
wonderful.
able to track that down. I figured out there's got to be a way of tracking down that picture. And sure enough,
Sure
there's
enough.
one picture, and it's actually on our Instagram page. We did a reel about it.
I was
Yeah.
just going to ask anything for the part 1 and part 2 that you could send over. I always like to put
Sure.
links to our show notes so that
Mhm.
way they go along with the story and we post them on our website as well for a little bit more in-depth behind the scenes
Right.
with all the information that you have. So that
Mhm.
would be great.
Excellent. Did we talk about Old Glegley and Doug?
O'Glegley's
Old Glegley's the family
The family
spirit
spirit guide.
who saved a member of our family, Doug.
I think I
Perfect.
did.
I
The one-
think you
the
did.
one-
I remember the
Mhm.
O'Glegley. I wanted to ask a question more, Leslie, about the Great Flood and how that coincides with your research in the ufology, I should say.
Mhm.
Can you
Yes.
explain more of that? Because I'm very intrigued by that.
Yes, definitely. One of the things I brought to the relationship, Stephen brought so many experiences, but I did have a minor. In college, I minored in ancient art history,
Mhm.
and one of the things I studied was this book by a man named Fraser. He in the 1700s he wrote this book, and he had tracked down 500 separate cultures that had a flood myth in their most
Yeah.
ancient lore, and so there's 500 Noah stories all around the world.
At that time, now there's 1,200.
Yeah, since that time, which the 1700s has been a long time, that there's
Yeah.
more have been tracked down. There's something like 1,200 of them.
Yeah,
now.
according to
So
Hancock. Yeah.
completely separate cultures. The Samoans have a flood myth. The Hopi have a flood myth. The Inuit have a flood myth.
Close.
The Indians, in India have several flood myths, actually.
Depending on regionals, but anyway.
And so in China, and everybody just has one. And I actually surmised, and I took a class in celestial navigation at college too, where because I was a sailor, at the time I had a sailboat and I was racing sailboats, and I was just interested in learning more about navigation and possibly taking the boat further and stuff.
Yeah.
And one of the things I learned was that the currents of the world all travel from east to west. It's called the Coriolis effect, because the Earth is spinning towards the east, the water, it's almost like the planet is spinning out from under the water below it, and the water then consequently flows to the west. And so I realized that if the Great Plains of North America ever completely flooded, the water would actually try and go west because of the Coriolis effect. And I surmised that the Grand Canyon, therefore, if there really was a flood all over the plains of the continent,
including Canada,
maybe the Grand Canyon was not carved in a matter of millions of years, but more like a couple of weeks. As the floodplain drained through the area between the two mountain ranges that come together there. And so I had that crazy idea a long time ago. And actually, I didn't write it into the book because it's a bit out there, but it started me looking into the possibility that the Great Flood really did happen. It sounds like from all these myths that have the same story. And then we looked at the extinction events of 13,000 years ago as probably the cause of the Great Flood. At 13,000 years ago, we lost the Clovis people of North America, the mammoth, the mastodon, the saber-toothed cat, the dire wolf, the American horse and camel, a lot of other animals too, that all were wiped out at the same time, or shortly thereafter died out.
Yeah, like the giant ground sloth. It held on for longer because of the Sierra Nevadas.
Because it was also in the West Coast, So then what people started to determine was that these extinctions were caused by a celestial impact of some kind. They figured out that in the soil from 13,000 years ago, called the Uccello horizon and the younger Dryas boundary, were nanodiamonds, lots of nanodiamonds discovered in the the northeast quadrant of the North American continent. And nanodiamonds form in no other way except celestial impact. The dust from
the tail that follows them, all the microparticles.
Yeah, the little dust particles that come with any asteroid, meteor, or comet. They become superheated as they come through the atmosphere, and they form these little tiny microscopic round diamonds called nanodiamonds. And so the discovery of the nanodiamonds proved there was some celestial impact, but we hadn't found the crater yet when we first started our...
Yeah, we found out about the nanodiamonds about 30 years ago now?
About 3 decades ago. So, and then we thought it was the Hiawatha. The Hiawatha asteroid impact crater was discovered in northern Greenland in 2016. We thought, this is it. This is right where we think it should be. And sure, it wasn't it.
The scientists at the time were divided, but they're leaning towards that this was the smoking gun that caused the extinction event 12,850 years ago. And it turns out now that it actually was in the Lake Superior area.
Yeah, they found there's another impact zone only about 1,000 miles west of this other crater. So who knew there were two asteroid impacts?
And this one was a comet.
This was the younger Dryas comet, and it hit Lake Superior when Lake Superior was still covered with ice. We were coming out of an ice age at the time. So the ice sheet was still that low. And when it hit the ice sheet, it sent this shock wave of ice sleet storms out in every direction at hundreds of miles an hour. And this is what caused the mammoths in Siberia to instantly freeze with the food still in their mouths.
And the fruit trees.
That's the one thing, too, that's so weird about that incident was the fruit trees. Everyone knows who's had a fruit crop exposed to a sudden frost knows that the trees drop the fruit.
Yeah.
In order for the tree to survive, right? It's a defense mechanism. These fruit trees had the fruit frozen onto them.
Whoa.
Flash freezing of some kind. And so that's what we think actually happened. And see, we were looking also for why did our race separate? Why are there some of us that are technologically far advanced and some of us are not, right? And we looked for a possible cause, and I thought, Yeah, the Great Flood. And sure enough, this cataclysm really did happen. And we're talking about tsunamis, 1,000-foot high tsunamis rushing to every coastline in the world, you know?
It was
Yeah.
like in the northern hemisphere primarily.
Particularly.
In fact, the nanodiamond has been found on 4 continents in 10 different countries so far.
Yeah.
And so we know,
Mhm.
we also know too that at least in 10 different countries that those forests were all on fire at the same time, which
Yeah.
is
Oh, wow.
a typical thing that happens when
Especially
a
with
comet
comets.
comes through that is
Yeah.
also superheated, that it's dropping preheated particles and basically sets
It
the
causes
cloud
these air bursts in front of
air
the
burst.
comet,
Yes.
and that are essentially bursts of fire as it's coming through. And so the comet comes through, sets everything on fire, but then hits the ice sheet and turns 1,500 gigatons of ice into water vapor up into the sky.
Oh, yeah.
And which would have rained down over the old myth, the 40 days and 40 nights. Add a 0 to that number. More like
Wow. Okay.
100 days of rain and torrential rains and climatic upheaval.
So once we
Um,
found out about the Lake Superior comet and the
Mhm.
time frame, they've actually mapped it to 12,850 years ago, and we knew about the extinction events. Also, the thing too,
Yeah,
the
so-
commonality with the 1,200 different extinction events, like 1,200 different Noah stories in
Mhm.
different forms,
Mhm.
is that they all had forewarning. They
yes.
all had foreknowledge. In other words, that
Oh.
we on the Earth had to have had at least as advanced astronomy as we have now, if not more, to be able to see at least a year or two in advance that
Right.
we're going to get hit, and there's nothing we can do about it. So
All of these warnings were like, if they were near high enough ground, the advice would be go to high ground, move
Mhm.
your population to high ground. If there was nothing like that around, they'd say build an ark, quick,
Yeah.
build a big
Right.
boat fast. And
Or-
then if they were in a place where they could dig under ground and still be high enough where the tsunamis wouldn't destroy their, but they'd be safe from the torrential atmospheric changes.
Mm.
Maybe the wave too. That
the city of
Kuyu in Turkey, the one that where they found it's underground.
Yes,
Okay.
I've heard of it. Yep.
Yeah. We think that there's a story from that time frame and the people that occupied it thousands of years ago was that this king was told by God to dig a city underground because a
Yep.
winter was coming that no one had
Wow.
ever heard of before.
Ahura Mazda.
Yeah, the god was Ahura Mazda and King Yima was the king. And so he decreed that the population would dig an underground city and some 20,000 of his people would be able to move safely underground
with your animals.
survive with the
Yes,
animals
sir.
stuff for
I remember
Sure.
watching the documentary on that, and it was neat because I saw where they had the stalls for the animals.
Yes,
And
yeah.
Mhm.
it was just like it was like a cool subterranean huge house. It just
Right.
had all these ways,
They-
and then you'd have little rooms set off for each families. It was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That
and
was
they
I love
and they-
that.
And they since have found that they connect like every 15 or 20 miles. You'll find another one like there in Kuyu.
Wow.
That's another
city states
another-
connected to
yes.
each other underground.
like
City-
a couple hundred. It's like a couple hundred miles now.
yeah.
And they figured that they built them far enough apart, like that's how far like a horse loaded with stuff could go in a day. So again, that the horses and the stalls would be on like level 1 or 2,
Mhm.
and some of them went down 13 stories. Well,
Stone tools at the bottom, which dated back to they thought 12,000 years at least. So it could be why not a little bit longer.
incredible what they did, but they did it.
And have you either of you guys seen the Deep Impact movie?
Oh yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. I love that movie.
Yeah.
Made a
Yeah.
great president. Yeah.
So we think that we actually had 13,000 years ago, there were some city states around our planet that were fairly advanced technologically speaking. They had advanced astronomy
Like Atlantis.
and they saw this thing coming and they warned the whole world to
Mhm.
essentially, usually it's like some disembodied voice, like God is warning us. God came and warned us. you
Yeah.
know,
Sometimes
to
it's
build
in
an-
person, but yes, it was. Yeah, they couldn't save everybody, but they wanted to save the technology and the culture.
So plan A, of course, in the movie was to send the astronauts up to blow up the asteroid.
Right.
And yay, we all live. And then, but plan B was
The ark.
to dig these deep underground arcs and sent people down and took their technology with them, their culture, all their knowledge, and animals and
Ways of producing energy,
genetic
energy and heat
producing abilities and food producing.
and water.
And then they took the cream of the crop of humanity, the top 50,000.
Actually, it's a million, but yeah.
Whatever it was in the movie. But we think that this actually did happen. And that our race is cruising along, everything's fine. We're building, we've got this pyramid building, fairly advanced culture of human beings surviving in different places on the planet, and some more remote, less advanced people too. But we think that they saw this thing coming, and in order to save humanity, they dug in. And this is who's launching UFOs. Now, the climactic upheavals after the comet hit were 1,000 years. 1,000 years, you wouldn't be able to grow crops.
But yeah, it was very limited crop growing. There would have been some, like different
near the end, maybe, but
yes, because like for instance, the northern hemisphere, it was basically a mess. Southern hemisphere, it was less. For instance, the Aborigines in Australia, which happen to have golden blood. You may have heard of the golden blood, which only like 50 people in the world have been identified with that. It's always Rh negative and has none of the 61 antigens. It's like the rarest blood in the world. But the Aborigines go back about 50,000 years. So the Aborigines weren't wiped out by the event 13,000 years ago. So certain places, they still had the ability to probably have crops. But you look at Siberia.
But not North America at all.
Siberia, people forget Siberia had crocodiles, had camels, had more.
Rhinoceros.
It had more variety of mammals than we have in North America. Okay. And also, too, the Hudson Bay used to be the North Pole. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So have you heard about the lithospheric shift theories of...
No, I have not.
Yeah, it's a wild one. But how under our crust is liquid lava, right?
Magma.
Liquid magma. There's some theories that the crust and the top is like a skin of an orange that is sliding around on this liquid and can sometimes move.
It's called the crustal displacement theory.
Or a lithospheric shift. And that's why our poles used to be, one used to be when it was in the East Hudson Bay and
Bering Strait.
One time it was in the Bering Strait.
Yeah.
And Hapgood was able to calculate when these shifts happen. And one of them was between 12,000 and 18,000 years ago. And we think one thing that might cause a lithospheric shift is a pretty good sized comet.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And so that would have just added to the wave action of the tsunamis. That would have made them, instead of maybe 1,000 foot high, maybe 2,000
apocalyptic level, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So almost nothing was left. And our genetic model shows
this too is very important here.
That we, at some point, we were down to only about 10,000 individuals.
On the surface.
Oh, wow.
Our entire population has regenerated from those 10,000.
Around 13,000 years ago, we had what they call genetic bottleneck.
Yes.
For lack of a better term, that's what they call it. Yes.
And now we know what.
8 billion of us surface dwellers here have regenerated from only 10,000, which makes us quite a bit less diverse than we probably were. Probably telepathy was not that uncommon of a thing.
We think that it's
so cool.
It's telepathy, and a lot of these powers start to come to humans when they do the chakra opening work and the chanting work and the meditation work. We think it's actually a human birthright. It's just atrophied in us for surface schmucks.
Is that the percentage that my husband always talks about? There's the percentage of the brain that we can't tap into.
Yeah.
Is that the meditation part that you were all talking about? Is that the chakra?
Yes.
Is that why everyone says if you really want to speak with the aliens or your higher power, God, whatever, you got to tap into that meditation part where you're letting everything go, opening your chakra. Is that the part of the brain that people talk about? That's
like the third eye.
Actually, when I was first going through acupuncture college, I had a lot of interesting teachers, and one of them was very good with the brain, especially with how they produce different type of neurochemicals and that kind of stuff using acupuncture. But there's an area of the brain toward the center of the brain where there's basically a big open, like a black hole. big open
Oh.
area. And that's, the mystics say, that's the seat of meditation. That's the seat of enlightenment, this
Mhm.
kind of open area. But there's also areas of the brain that literally have become atrophied because they haven't been used. In other words, if, like, for
Right.
instance, a lot of the things we're doing right now with children is that we sit them in front of a computer at 2 years of age
Mhm.
before they actually know how to really read a book. So what that does, it amps up the brain and the brain waves where they can't really use an alpha state or a delta state properly. It gives them sleep disturbance. The other thing about that too is that I really think that the kids should also learn how to do Tai Chi and also learn how to you're pretty much by the time about the age of 5, you're pretty much, your personality is being formed, and the
Mhm.
way you use your brain. It's this how we use our brain and how
And
we're being taught. We're not being taught to use our brain in the proper way.
I
remember,
agree 100%.
our teachers that were when we had teachers when we were doing the chakra work, they said that when you're a child, our brains are open, we're losing like 5%.
Hmm.
Using
Mm.
5%, yeah.
But then as we age, instead of using more of the brain, we actually start using less. And I noticed that when I was a kid, I was more psychic than when I grew
Yeah.
up. You know what I mean? It's like I lost some of those abilities, but I gained them right back as soon as I started doing the chakra opening
And
work.
Tai
Yeah.
Chi.
I was
And
gonna
yeah,
say that there's like a concept. It's changed so much since the start of me researching the paranormal and mysticism and stuff like that. But there's this concept, like, I think it's the spiritual ego. And it's like the lower that you have a spiritual ego, the more open you are to that sort of activity. And they say that kids and then older people, like aging people, have lower spiritual egos as well as pets because they're like, they can't differentiate between it. And then as we are in this like middle age part of our lives, it's more of, oh, we're more skeptical. So we have a higher spiritual
Hmm.
ego. Is that kind of the same thing? Or
Yeah, there was a study, actually, it was funny. Sanjay Gupta, he's an MD that we like to
Mhm.
watch sometimes.
Yep,
And
I like him.
apparently there's this happiness factor that, when we're younger, we tend to be happier. And then we go through our middle age time where we tend to be less happy. And then as we get older, the happiness factor tends to seem to go up, at least as far as from a statistical standpoint. And I think that's maybe subjective there, but
Mhm.
by the same token, when you're like a child, your raging hormones haven't kicked in yet. Your growth hormones are going, and maybe around 13 or 14 or 15, then you start to get more of the testosterone or the estrogens and the other ones that make you, and the oxytocins, and the ones that make you think, oh, maybe other sex is really attractive. But it's like our viewpoints are totally different when we're children. We
Hmm.
are definitely, we're learning. Everything is new. The world is still a wonder. But I say now what's happening is that
yeah.
we know what's happening when the kids in front of computer screens. It's wrong. It's wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. So let
I-
me ask you a
I-
simple question, just
Mhm.
a simple question is, how long do you think aliens or extra or interdimensional beings have been around then?
Oh,
We
that's a
don't,
good question.
first of all, we think they are a splintered branch off of the human
The,
being.
the 13,000
Okay.
year ones.
Okay.
Yes. And so we think that living underground for thousands and upon thousands of years, first of all, that would make a whole species of agoraphobe where they probably wouldn't want to
Right.
come back up.
Mhm.
And they're comfortable down there. But we think some did come up and some didn't. That's why I think the grays exist. To me, when I see a
Oh.
gray in my mind's eye, I see a closer relative to the human being than any other on our planet that we know of, right? The bonobo chimp doesn't stand perfectly upright, and this is our closest relative on the planet, right?
Hmm.
So we actually have more in common with grays than we do with our other closest relative here
Mhm.
Right.
in the world. They walk perfectly upright like we do. They're much skinnier, of course, but and to me, it seems like they've just been underground for thousands of years. That's why the eyes got bigger. That's why they got blacker. The pupil just opened up so that they could see in the dark.
They're also
Practically.
Ooh,
telepathic too.
wow.
And they're telepathic with us. And I think that right there is another sign that they're relation to us. Because is it possible to be telepathic with something that you're not? you're this a different
Yeah, that's a good
species.
point.
Right.
Stop from 26 light years away? No, probably not.
But
No.
we know for a fact they are telepathic. That's how they communicate with their abductees, and so many different languages too.
Mhm.
Yeah, because telepathy doesn't depend upon learning a language. Telepathy is a much more basic way of communicating. That's why the original languages are all pictographic.
Yeah, like,
Cuneiform, pictographic, ideological. There's stick figures. It's basically when you think of a tree, you don't think of TREE. No matter which language you're talking about, you don't automatically go
Yeah.
to the word. You see an oak tree or a pine tree or a cedar or whatever it is. That's the first thing that you see. And if you're communicating telepathically, you don't have to have a universal translator like on Star Trek.
Oh,
You're
but-
communicating in pictures. In fact, Chinese is very pictographic.
Right.
Chinese people think in concept.
Yeah.
I know this as being an acupuncturist and a Chinese.
And we
speaking
think
from
more
Chinese.
linear.
We're linear thinkers. They're conceptual.
and even the very ancient Sumerian that later was cuneiform with the little wedge shape.
Yeah, the Proto-Sumerian.
Proto-Sumerian, the really early version of it is more like the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt. But
Right.
A little more like pictures.
Right.
Now, do you think the one thing I always ask myself is how did we all get to know about each other? How did China get to know about Egypt or people over here get to know about China and Egypt? A lot of the things in the ancient alien works say that they were there to help them build the pyramids, or they were over
Yes.
here to help
Right.
build Easter Island. What are your thoughts on that?
Let me take this
Go
one.
ahead.
No, on the west coast of the South American continent, Peru, Bolivia, all along where they attribute these incredible sites to the Inca.
Mm.
And when those were in 500 AD-ish time period. But then it never made sense. The Inca were a Bronze Age people. And some of these giant sites like Sacsayhuaman, for instance, the walls of Sacsayhuaman are built with andesite, which is the same hardness as granite.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, if you had a bronze tool and you're whacking it on granite, you can whack it all day long and you'll just wreck the tool. So it made no sense that they would be able to cut these things so precisely and put them in place.
And melt them into place and bevel them.
And so then we discovered that sure enough, they didn't, because under one of these cities that the megalithic cities, it's called Karl Supe.
Yeah, Carl Super.
One of the pieces of the big pyramid's foot or something broke off, and they were able to find some grass netting underneath of the piece that broke off, and they were able to carbon date it, and it carbon dated to 5,000 years ago. So a 5,000-year-old pyramid building society was living in Peru and Bolivia 5,000 years ago, and we don't know squat about them. We don't have anything about them in our history books.
And even the Incas said that the roads and all said, no, there was this here. There it is here when we got here.
Yeah.
They had nothing to do with Machu Picchu or anything like that.
Yeah, when the conquistadors showed up and stuff,
That's what gets back to the whole thing about the re-educating of the human race, that we had become barbaric and cannibals on the surface. And there's multiple stories of these teachers or these wise ones or these gods that came down, like the Viracochas or the Quetzalcoatl's or the Huangdi. And they set up a civilization, teaches animal husbandry, how to not be cannibals, to teach metallurgy.
And this is in these flood myths. Almost all of them begin the same way, where you're in trouble. There's a huge flood coming.
There's a great flood.
But then at the end, they say, and then man fell into barbarism and declined to the point of cannibalism. And God took pity on us poor Slavs and sent these teachers. And like in South America and the Central American, this teacher shows up who is Caucasian with a big beard, flies in on a platform. And this is where I say they used to play God.
Right.
Now they're playing space alien, but they're still cousins of ours that separated from us thousands of years ago and didn't lose their technology. And they watched us just devolving into cannibalistic.
Just
you
killing
know,
ourselves, killing ourselves off, basically.
And I
Yeah.
think they figured out at some point that they need us too, because I think maybe living underground all this time has made their population less viable.
Is
And
that
maybe
why they
that's-
are abducting us, Leslie?
Mm.
And
So,
the
yeah.
cattle and the sheep and the
It's
horse?
genetic material. He who controls the genetics of the planet rules the planet.
And we think they took animals down with them when they went underground. And so that's why those animals may need regular infusions of DNA from surface dwelling
Oh.
animals.
So
Which is, I
when
think,
you
what
say
the mutilation, cattle mutilation thing is.
So when you say the cousins thing, you said the Greys, we look at them as cousins. They're a different
Yes.
form of how we used to be.
Yeah, we basically think that human beings, we make terrible slaves. And we also know that we are already playing around with genetics, with CRISPR technology. We're fooling around with bringing back the mammoth, and we're working on certain types
Right.
of blindness. Okay, these are like, we give our cousins a 13,000 year advantage. Probably genetics is just playing with the Lego set for them. Okay. And so,
Right.
yeah, so probably the Greys are an offshoot of humans, but have been manipulated.
We think
You
so,
know?
into a slave race. Because
Right.
when they take their abductees, when they take their victims, they show no feeling at all. And when they have completely, and they're very goal driven. They're never like, oh, wait, what are we supposed to do next? They're never like that.
They're just-
do this, do that. do
Not
that.
much in the way of compassion. Yeah.
And no compassion at all. And no matter how much pain and terror they inflict on their abductees, they don't react to it. We started to think, we know that this meeting that happened with Eisenhower and the aliens, this was supposed to be with the Nordics. The Nordics are the key. We think that the Nordics are the ones in charge. And so they're the ones that met with Eisenhower. They're the ones that met with Admiral Byrd, what his diary talks about.
1947. Yes.
And
Right.
if you recall, have you guys heard of the Valiant Thor incident?
No, it doesn't
I
sound
don't think
familiar
so.
to me.
Valiant Thor, it was in the 50s, I believe.
Hit
and
50.
a man landed a spaceship a small spaceship in
Okay.
Virginia field and asked to be taken to our leader, so to speak. And he said he was an alien from Venus, and he appeared to be a Caucasian, red-haired, white male.
There is one picture of
What?
him that is in
Yeah.
existence.
This
Oh.
theory is that the Nordics are indistinguishable from human beings because they are us, right? And we think they, at some point, came up to the surface, back up to the surface, to lord it over us as gods and ruling families. And I think they used us as slaves many times, but we don't we don't make good slaves. So we think that they may be, I think what happened was they discovered the Greys underground and the ones that never came back up to the surface that have just been living under there for 13,000 years.
Yeah.
And we think that maybe they took them and turned them into this slave race.
Even the ability to mess around with genetics, it's not that hard.
Yeah, and we think that's what reptilians are. When they need reptilians, they breed them. When they need insectoids, they breed them. They use genetic modification just like we would use any tool in our arsenal. And
So who's the one that we have to fear?
That's a
It's
good
not
question.
really a fear thing. It's more like an opportunity and a necessity type thing. They need us and we need them. And they really want us to denuclear. The basic thing, they did not want us to gain the power of the atomic, of the atom,
Yeah.
splitting the atom.
They're quite upset about that.
I don't blame 'em.
That's why you saw the Foo Fighters during the latter part of World War II. Nobody knew who they were. The Germans thought they were us. The Japanese thought they were the Germans. Okay, but they were definitely being reported. And then all the stuff that happened after that,
And the
the
Malmstrom.
Malmstrom incident in the 60s, where they took 10 ICBMs offline one at a time in Montana, and they've done this in different countries around the world, showing us that they can basically neutralize our nukes. But they're also crashing their stuff too. I think that they basically were not wanting to have to really do what they had to do. And so, yeah, there's probably a lot less of them than there are us. And we think that they're crashing their craft.
Well,
Like, we have to do something.
The fact that people say this, like, how come they came here from these distant star systems, which we don't think happened, right? And then just crashed their ship here. Like, don't they know any better? And I think what happened is that they were so alarmed by us discovering nukes that they realized they had to unmothball their fleet of flying
Oh.
craft. And so they had to unmothball the fleet, and they also had to train the Greys on how to fly them so that they
Right.
themselves wouldn't be killed, but their automaton would be killed instead. I think that's why they were crashing them at first, and they're not doing that so much anymore. I think they upgraded their equipment.
And their technology's better too. Upgrade that too.
They're following we found this out at did you guys watch the hearings last summer?
Yep.
Yeah, we were both live
pilots.
texting each other during it.
Then.
Yeah, I mean, in ufology circles, it wasn't news that we had crash ships and dead alien bodies. We knew that one. That wasn't the shock it might have been to some people. But what did come to me as a surprise was that the pilots are saying that these craft, these crystal ball things with the spinning cube inside
right.
them, these things are following our military absolutely every single time they go
Oh, God, yeah.
maneuvers. And so this is what's going on. They didn't get what they wanted. They didn't get us to denuclearize. And so they're monitoring our nuclear weapons every single time we take them out and watching, and not just our country, but they're doing it with Russia and anybody with nukes.
China.
They're monitoring the nukes. And I, for one, feel a little more comforted. If we did, maybe they would come along and go, no,
Let's stop this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that would actually happen? Because I believe I remember seeing one old footage of a rocket going up that I believe was a nuclear weapon, and you can see a UFO coming into frame.
It blows
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. There is that. It's
Yeah.
again, it gets down to like how many of them are there, and we have 8 billion of us on the surface, right?
Resources, the amount of resources they're putting
And
in.
I personally think that we're an experiment that's gotten out of control. There's just way too many of us, and we know what we're doing to the climate. There's no denying that, and it's just not getting better.
And when we do get messages from the aliens, when they bother to give a clear message to people, the children in Zimbabwe or where it was, they landed and they told the children, take better care of the planet and stop using nukes.
Yeah, and they communicated with the kids telepathically.
I was going to
And we
say,
think-
yeah.
This is because we believe it's because they're sharing the planet with us. Their butt is on the line too. They have skin in this game, and that's why they're so alarmed by what we're doing with the nukes. You know?
So what's their point of coming down here and taking women to have children? What's their point of that? Because is that something where they're trying to make a hybrid to be able to live on here, and they can go out in space as well? They can go in both, because I watched something the other day. I think it was Terrence Howard, and he was explaining that he doesn't know why the government and Elon Musk is saying, let's do Mars, let's go live on Mars, because there's no way that a human body, no matter what kind of suit that you make, is going to be able to hold a person together, because the atmosphere expands and contracts wherever you go in space. So then the only thing I could think of, and I'm probably wrong, that's why I'm asking you, but the only reason I can think that they're making a hybrid is to be able to live here on Earth, but able to go somewhere else because they have an alien DNA. If that's not true, what would it be?
We think that they're doing the hybridization program because they want to infiltrate our numbers. They want to infiltrate our society.
The higher position.
Just from the inside out. They're not getting what they want, right? They want us to denuclearize. Could they use force because they have the power to use it? Yes, but we think that they're more spiritual beings than
They
we
would
are.
have to throw their hand if they want to do it.
And maybe a little afraid of our vast number on the surface here. So we think that they're trying to infiltrate us from the inside out and change our society from the inside out. I think this is their plan.
Yeah,
So
the thing is, the fact that matters also, you talk about Mars, as soon as astronauts go into space for any length of time, their biorhythmic clocks automatically synchronize to that of Mars, okay, to the day on Mars, okay. And also, too, if you're living on Mars currently, you would be taller, okay, because there's a lot less. We have 17 pounds, just at sea level, we have 17 pounds of pressure on our bodies when we're standing up. That's 17 pounds, and we're at sea level. That's why people who tend to live at higher elevations tend to be a little taller. Okay, because there's less
Ooh.
pressure. Okay, there's all this type of stuff that happens.
Okay.
So the thing is, I think I agree with Leslie that what they want to do, they want to infiltrate us from the inside out, not necessarily to go become a spacefaring race like Elon Musk
Mhm.
wants to do, but they want to basically change us from a spiritual or from a value level. Our values right now are just really messed up.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they think of us as barbarians. This is
Yeah.
I
what
don't
they
blame
call
'em.
us.
I can see that, yeah.
I get that too.
So, are
You know,
they
sorry.
sorry, not to cut you off, but just to make sure I'm following, are they wanting then, or I guess in this theory, to have their hybrids in positions of power so that they can
Yes.
Yes.
pave the way for change? Okay, that makes
Yes.
sense.
And they one of the things that Professor Jacobs is one of the guys that we get a lot of our data from because he did the 10,000 hypnotic regressions on it. So
Yeah.
it's a huge data pool. What he says is going on is this infiltration campaign. And they have one big advantage over us is that they can read our minds. They're telepathic. They look like us, but they can read our minds. Slowly but surely, they're probably going to maneuver themselves into positions of power in
Yeah.
different countries and exert change on us.
In fact, higher up individuals in China and in Russia have been caught on hot mics saying that you'd be surprised how many of them are walking amongst us right now.
I
Yeah,
was
we-
just about to ask you. I know that a lot of people get flack for being a conspiracy theorist and thinking this, but in your minds, is there any type of alien race that's cloaked into something else in our government anywhere in our
Oh,
politics?
that's the thing that's been going around since George Bush about how George Bush was actually a reptiloid or
Right.
Tillian, yeah.
that conspiracy theory stuff really cracks me up sometimes.
Yeah, but
But,
that doesn't mean they're wrong necessarily either. But we don't know. The government is pretty tight with information, and it's not easy to get information out of them and requests, and they just
Yeah,
ignore us. You know?
from what we've been able to find out so far is that now it's the human race that is wanting to keep the story quiet about our cousins
Right.
living under our feet and actually being a lot more advanced than we are. Because you got to look at the effect it would have on on humanity in toto. There's so many different religions, and it would just upset religions to start with,
Yeah.
and then the
Right.
stock markets,
Stock
and
markets would
then
crash.
who's actually in charge, and it's just and then you've been hiding this from us for all this time, and
Mhm.
we've known.
Yeah.
There are all these factors you got to think about. This how much unrest it would cause.
Right. Well,
you
we
know?
would cease to be the like apex species at that point,
Yeah.
if that
To
was
start
common
with.
knowledge.
To start
And then
with,
from
yeah.
there,
Yeah, not just the
Chaos.
apex species. We're Americans, right? Like we're in charge.
Everybody wants our democracy. Everybody wants
Right.
this. Everybody wants that. Oh my
Right,
God.
yeah.
We're like
It's
the
annoying.
police of the world, and
It would change so many things, and
Yeah.
it'd be so like we got a small taste of it in 1938 with War of the Worlds. Now, I don't think that the
Mm.
human race would react in the same way that we reacted in 1938 because of things like we've been desensitized because of Star Trek and Star Wars, Guardians of the Galaxy, and all this other kind of stuff in the Alien movies. So yeah, we probably wouldn't react as violently as we would have in the past. But still, it's if a person has been studying Catholicism or whatever it may be, Islam, and then you find out that's really not what's really going on.
Mhm.
The Buddhists would probably be in the Taoists would probably be just fine with it.
Mhm.
In fact,
Right.
In fact, I think the American Indians would be say, we've been telling you this for 1,000
Yeah.
years. You're
Yep.
space brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Our
they said
star
they probably
people.
star people said they probably just fine with it. Other people, no, we go nuts.
In your experiences, both of you, have you ever had that feeling of communication from them to you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And can you describe that? What happened?
I don't know if I told you about when the coins were magnetized in my pocket.
yeah,
Mhm.
but Courtney had
Yeah,
never.
Courtney
Yeah.
hadn't heard
I mean,
that, right?
yeah.
I mean, that alien, well, actually, we call them cousins, whatever.
Mhm.
Again, this goes back to the old Glegley stuff. Now, that goes back to my great grandparents that we had this family protector that was tall and skinny and would
So
manifest
cool.
different ways, different colors. Frequently, it would be like a tall black entity with a red fez that some people would see.
Mm.
For me, It was a tall blue-white, intense blue-white light energy being that came to our front door when I was 18 years of age. I'd gotten so afraid to sleep in my room that I
Mm.
decided to sleep in my work clothes on the couch in the living room. I was a cabinet maker with my dad at the time, and we've been all experiencing weird things together. And I just decided from what happened the night before, I'm not going to sleep in that room. So anyways, I woke up about 5:30 in the morning and I was laying face up and I looked at my piano because I was thinking about what I was going to play that day. And then I heard the little fountain in the other room. So I was awake. I was alert.
Hmm.
But it was January. It was dark. So I decided not to get up and I was just laying there. And then this being from behind me, from 25 feet behind me from the front
Wow.
door, just came walking, floating very quickly, like in a second and a half to 2 seconds, covered that distance and stopped by my right side. As soon as it stopped by my right side, the whole right side of my body, might as well cut a knife down it, bisect me. I have no movement. Okay.
Mm.
It's not that it was like scary, but I couldn't even, my eye was open, but I couldn't close it. I
Okay.
I had no control of my nervous system. And it bent down and it said into my ear in a whisper, not inside my head, but it said into my ear, said, "Hi, Steve," kind of in a whisper.
Oh,
Okay. And I was thinking, oh, I'm going to see the family spirit god, Old Glegley, that I heard about since I was like 3 years of age, that people had seen. And he'd helped different people. And I was thinking, I'm going to see Old Glegley. But the other half of me, the logical brain says, dude, you can't move. You're paralyzed. You can't move. And I wanted to look at his face. And I tried as hard as I could to look at his face. But I was like half scared and half excited. And
hmm.
that paralyzation lasted for maybe about 10 seconds. And then
Oh,
it just basically, it stopped leaning down towards me and it basically went out the front door, by the way, the whole room was filled with blue-white light.
wow.
The whole living room was just like the whole house was filled with it. And then I black out. Then what was the interesting part was 6 hours. That was already interesting enough. 6 hours
The
later,
climax is the whole
yeah,
story.
6 hours later, it was 11:30, and my dad and I were getting hungry because we were like workmen. And I reached
Hmm.
into my right hand side pocket to pull out whatever coins and money I had, and I put them on the table. And all the coins, standard American coins, were all magnetized. They were all magnetic. I could pick up the coins by the edge, by the face. My dad could do the same thing too. This is 6 hours after I was contacted by this being, and
Hmm.
we just like said, "This isn't possible." And I had nails in my pocket too, and of course those were all magnetic too. But it didn't matter. I could pick up the nails with the coins. And the only thing I wish I'd
Whoa.
done now, this is 1979. I wish I just like
Yeah, no camera
went,
phones.
just found a camera and just
know.
taking pictures. But by the same token, people would say, "Oh, you're faking it because
Yeah.
you glued them together or something like that." So
No.
And
it
it's
doesn't matter.
possible to make American coins
You
magnetic.
can't do it.
They design them on purpose so they
So
can't.
they're not.
They can
Like-
go in
Right.
vending machines otherwise.
They're designed on purpose. I've tried with really strong magnets to repeat that what happened, and I haven't been able to do it. I've done research too, and I have not been able to get an answer as far as what I was exposed to.
So we surmise though that he was taken because this thing where people have something weird happen and then they black out right in the middle of
Right.
it, especially if sometimes they're terrified. The family
Right.
would be terrified of something and that they saw, like Philip saw a gray
Sure.
alien in his room one time and his heart is pounding and he's got this surge of adrenaline and then blacks out.
Again, it was tall and skinny.
Again, yeah, tall and skinny. And I think Stephen was taken, and sometime
Right.
during this abduction, he was exposed to some incredibly strong electromagnetic field.
Right.
Or
Kind,
or
you know.
plasma or something else. But the thing is,
Something.
the following night, the last thing that happened in this group of five was my dad was awakened in the middle of the night, and he saw this intense wall of blue-white light that was outside of my door. My bedroom door was
Oh.
open, and he, being a British guy who was a cop in England and was in the Royal Air Force and went through World War II, said, "I'm going to get up and find out what's going on."
Yeah.
So he was getting up out of bed, and then this voice inside his head, not from outside, but inside his head, said, "Jeffrey, just relax. Everything's fine. Just go back to sleep. Basically, nothing to see here." And he did that. And I have no recollection. He told me about that in the morning time, but
Mhm.
And
And-
it makes no sense either.
I have
'cause
no
it's like,
recollection of what
well,
happened.
here's the
at all.
British guy, like all this then. He's just taking the covers off and he's about to get out of bed. And then suddenly,
He's told, we see he knew about O'Glegley. He grew up knowing about O'Glegley, so we just figured it was a family spirit guide or something.
Right.
I wasn't thinking at that time in 1979 when I was 18, I wasn't thinking that it was aliens. I just thought it was, I actually thought at one point that it was my grandfather who had died a year ago.
Like a
that
spirit guide or
that
spirit.
was saying goodbye to us, but
then it followed the family wherever they went. And frequently hauntings are a place. The hauntings tend to be tied to a location, and there's a spirit there who died there or whatever, or loved the place or whatever.
Yeah.
And like the lady in Avalon, she didn't die there. She died in Pasadena in 19.
yeah, but she loved the
She must
Kathleen
have loved
place.
that old
You go back. I heard that they go
man
back to
looking
where
out
they
over the
love.
ocean. Yeah,
And this phenomenon has followed me to at least 6 different houses.
Yeah.
And this O'Glegley character has followed the
family.
first. It started with the Newmans in Germany, and then the Rose and the Shaws in England, in Southern California, Southern and Northern California. So yeah, it's not a haunting. It's definitely alien.
Something
It's not
else,
really
yeah.
alien. It's something different. It's our cousins.
And we think a lot of times family would see something strange, and it's like the face of the abductor would be changed into something else. The boys, when they were young, they saw them as garden.
Yeah, that's scary.
That's awful. Yeah.
It's like
About a foot tall.
they always describe these strange memories as kind of shimmery, and I think that's a sign of memory tampering
I was gonna
that
say,
they
yeah.
do to people.
And my brother, like Leslie was saying, my brother for 2 years of his life, from about the age of about 6 to 8 or something like that, maybe 7 to 9, he spent 2 years of his life sleeping in the closet. And I said, Philip, why are you sleeping in the closet? He said, I'm afraid of the little men that come at night. And I
Yeah, I would
believed
be
him
too.
because
Yeah.
my brother was 6 years younger than me, and he's dead now. But
Oh, I'm sorry.
For
like I
that.
said, it's in the book. It's brutal what
There
happened.
is some sort of
Yeah, it was a murder-suicide that my brother killed my mom with a shotgun. He
Yeah.
killed both his cats first, and then he killed my mom and killed himself. I think it was to do with lifelong stress, and he started to come apart.
Yeah.
And my dad had just died a couple
Yeah.
months before that,
he didn't take that well.
and he was taking care of my mom 24/7. It was just one of these things that I lost almost my whole family like in about 3 months.
It was
I'm
really
so
intense.
sorry,
And
It's
Stephen.
awful.
And we
Yeah, it was
I
terrible.
think this has to do a lot with this PTSD that he had from this abduction phenomenon early
Yeah.
in life. Because, and he had some bizarre things like the sphere thing was really odd.
Yeah.
We were I think we were somewhere in our 40s, and we visited him, and we asked him how's things going, and he told us about this sphere. He had built a house for himself where the second story was the living quarters, and all along one side of the house he made a
Nice deck, an outside deck.
deck all the way along this whole side of the house. And at night, this silvery, sometimes it would be orange, sometimes silver,
Right.
it would
Ooh.
fly up and down the deck, like looking in each window and like kind of monitoring
About the
him.
size of the softball or a baseball.
Yeah.
I've heard reports like that from other stories. That's
Right.
interesting.
And one day he said, after a couple of weeks of this, he said, I'm going to confront the sphere. And he conquered his sphere fear, and
About midnight or 1 in the morning, something like
he
that.
went outside and put his hands on his hips and said, what do you want? And this thing is at the opposite end of the deck, and it rushes
Oh.
straight at him and penetrates his chest and goes out the back of his neck. And,
Dude.
and we were visiting at the time, and he said the next morning, and he told me, yeah, this just happened. It was, and I looked in the back, and sure enough, he had a bruise right where.
Oh.
Yeah.
You
Things
know,
like that.
about right where the.
I
thing-
thought so, but I can
pick
confirm
up.
it.
Yeah.
At first, I thought, you're joking, but too many things that happened to our family that, like I say, when I grew up as a kid, I was visited. The first experiences I had, I would be visited when I was 3 years old by this invisible. It was like an invisible cat, or like an invisible gnome. Actually, like an invisible. Actually, it was more like it was like a two-legged being that was about the size and weight of a cat that would be jumping on my chest and my stomach.
Oh.
And again, in the middle.
I don't
of
like
the night.
that.
And it was invisible when
Playful,
but it was
sort of,
playful. I was 3 years old, and it wasn't like doing anything, making any sounds. It was just like being playful.
Mhm.
So I just said, "Oh, this is like the family spirit guide." So I never thought much of it. I didn't tell my friends at school because you don't tell your friends at elementary school things like that are happening. They think either that you're
Right.
lying, that you're crazy, or you're living in a haunted house.
Tell them about that demon thing that attacked your mother.
Oh, yeah, this is at the house that my dad and my brother built up in Sonora, California, which is in the foothills of the Sierras, about 350 miles away from our house that I grew up in. So anyways, this was back in the early 80s. Yeah,
Okay.
early 80s. My mom was alone during the afternoon. The kids were at school, and she got up out of bed and she was attacked by what she called an imp, like a black
Mm.
imp, like maybe like the size of a monkey.
She said it had a
It had a hideously ugly
Yeah.
face and jumped on her back and was like saying all kinds of really weird kind of stuff. And it was like
Mhm.
biting her and she bit her neck. And
Oh my gosh.
she got it off finally and it went away. Thing is, she did have a bite on her neck, okay, from that incident. And she ended up getting what's called a scrofula, which is not a goiter, but goiter is like an inflammation of the thyroid, okay?
Mhm.
Scrofula is basically it's a lymphatic inflammation, okay? But she had this for the rest of her life. It was like
Oh, wow.
but she actually was bitten. She told my brother and my sister about what had happened, but it was one of these things, like, again,
The doctor was a cat, though.
yeah,
Mm.
she told the doctor that it was a cat. So he said, "Oh, it's cat scratch fever, right?" Which is BS, right? But anyways,
Mhm.
my sister, who's now actually a semi-professional ghost hunter with her husband in northern England, they do ghostly
Cool.
hunter
They're
ghostly locations.
Ghostly locations.
At ghostly locations. So my sister very vividly remembers it. She said in the email recently, she said, "Yeah, during that time, all three of us were really sick. We were feeling really sick
Mhm.
and weren't feeling good at all. And then this attack happened, and she said, Mom told it to go away and get out of here. And then they started feeling better after that. But
Oh,
I remember that time. Then it wasn't
That's
too long after
insane.
that. Then when Philip had his incidents that started out with two very bright white lights outside of his window, his
Mhm.
bedroom window, which faced the creek and a mountain and trees.
You
No,
it couldn't have been a car.
there's
No,
no cars
Right.
at all, no cars at all. And he just looked at them and having a very scientific mind that he was trying to make, is that people with
Yeah,
flashlights?
that's
And then he just
Mhm.
blacks out. The next night,
Mhm.
he called it a grabbling sound underneath his bed, and they had a couple
Hmm.
cats, and he thought, "Oh,
Oh.
it's a cat." So I'm just gonna
Right.
reach down and pet the cat. And instead of the cat responding, whatever, this hand grabbed his wrist.
Oh my
No.
God.
Okay,
Nope.
grabbed his
That's okay.
wrist, and he freaks out, and then he blacks out.
Yeah, again, he has this thrill of adrenaline, but
Mhm.
You don't black out after this.
and then falls asleep. No,
Yeah,
I
you
think
don't do that.
He's a 6'3", he's 6'3" guy. He's not gonna just, it was the next night that he saw
the great
Gray,
thing.
the tall gray in his doorway, and
And they're just staring at each other for a moment, he said, and
then he blacks out again.
A lot of people are jealous because they don't have these experiences. Do you think it's something that, because you know how a lot of families, it goes, you hear of someone, their mom,
I was gonna
their
ask that.
grandma.
Yeah.
Is
It goes
there
on like familial
something,
lines.
is there something
Yeah.
that draws them to a sort of person, or is it just the luck of the draw?
we
No,
we
it's
discovered with our research that
Go ahead.
Sarah, we discovered with our research that they tend to take Caucasian and they
Mhm.
tend to take green-eyed people and they tend to take RH negative people.
Huh.
And
statistically,
all of
right.
these are statistically more taken than would account in our population.
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's like they're after a very specific genetic line. And once they find that line, they take that person again and again and again and again
Mhm.
through their lives until they start having kids of their own. Then they start taking the kid. And then they'll
Right.
start taking the grandkid. And we think that this old Glegley character is like the alien handler of the family. When I
Oh.
say aliens, we're not really talking about them as aliens. They're
Right,
called
yeah.
Right.
cousins or intraterrestrials.
Yeah, we coined it intraterrestrial because they actually
Okay.
live inside the
Okay.
Earth.
That makes sense.
And we think they may have had space travel. So some of them may have
Mhm.
escaped to space. There's some
Dark side of the moon.
There's some structures on the moon that can't be explained, and
Right.
on Phobos and on Mars too. We think we might have had a rudimentary space program going, maybe slightly more advanced than we have now, where we actually were putting bases on Mars.
Now, are those
okay.
picture of structures that are on the moon and this whole conspiracy about the moon landing? A lot of things that I've watched and read, a lot of people seem to think that cut out of the 2-3 minutes from Buzz Aldrin and them, that it was a medical channel, but it's that they said something had come to them or they saw these bases. What's your research show? What do you
What our
think
research
happened?
showed, what our research has shown is that during that time period, they were actually approached by what they called looking humanoids. It was the reptiloids. That's why they had to switch. Also, too, if you ever get a chance to watch the debriefing, the hearing that the 3 astronauts did,
After
the news,
they came back,
after they came back out there,
Their faces were completely white.
Yeah.
It's sick.
they looked like they didn't want to talk about it. Like they said, they were actually still in a state of shock.
When they
Okay.
went and picked them
Right.
up, and I remember them getting out of the van when they got back to the base, and they both had their heads down and were walking while the cameras were flashing. And I'm like, wow, they don't seem happy to be the
Yeah,
first
they don't
men
look
to
like
walk
they're
on
You
the
think
moon.
that they'd
cheering,
be excited. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's time for ticker tape parade.
And
Are you
then-
kidding?
and then the 7 to 10 days after they were all rehydrated and checked for viruses and disease, and they actually met with the media, they's like,
They
these-
still look cows.
they look miserable. Yes, they saw something, experienced something, but still 10% of the United States population, still 10%, which is 35 million people, think that the Earth is flat, that the Earth is flat, and 12% of people still think that the moon landing was faked.
And
you
what
got
about
to know
you
who-
two?
No, we
Yeah.
don't think it was fake.
It was never fake.
Yeah.
Well, Buzz Aldrin was later in life when, what can they do? Kill me? I'm 99 years old or something, right? He started talking about what he saw on the trip over there. As they were flying, they saw that they were being followed by a UFO, followed the whole way.
Yeah, Neil Armstrong said, yeah, they've been following us the whole time. But Neil knew about it too.
Yeah, so they saw the UFO following them, and supposedly we landed, right, and then they landed too.
Right. Oh,
There was
see?
some
Okay.
communication. And essentially, NASA is the government. From then on, NASA became the enemy of truth. As far as
Never
the,
straight answer.
we call them never a straight answer.
That's funny.
They've just been lying to us.
As far as the stuff on Mars, I have a book that's the 2nd edition. It's called Alien Mars. It's by a guy called M.J. Craig, who I swear looks like a young Hugh Grant.
Oh,
He's
really?
Yeah. It's called Alien Mars. Anyway, so they got some of these pictures, and one of them absolutely looks like a car axle.
Yeah,
I
an
mean,
axle with 2 wheels in either.
they found so many things and these are very high resolution pictures taken by the little rovers and that type of stuff. And some of this stuff just, number one, it's not fake, and it's definitely not natural occurring. We're looking at, like I say, it's really strange that when humans go into space, we start to synchronize our bioclocks to the day of Mars. So there's some type of connection going on there. That's what we know.
Yeah.
And do you think back in the day, like where the Mayans and the Incas, do you believe that maybe that moon base that Buzz and them saw in 69, is that, do you think, like a continuous base? Is it still there? Or is that like a base that was there thousands and thousands of years ago? And then did they come down here and take Mayans and the native Indians? Do you think that they've been taking people since people have been here in America?
Yeah, they take people for sure. And sometimes they don't put them back, which the scariest part about all of this for me is some of our missing persons. There's this hotbed of UFO activity, but they've had something like 16,000 people go missing over the last, forget how many years.
30 or 40 years ago.
And we think that they sometimes take people for their experiments, whatever they need. But let's say they need a human brain. They're not putting that person back.
Obviously.
They need a heart or whatever else they need. That the idea that some of our missing persons have died on metal slabs surrounded by alien faces while they are paralyzed and cannot move.
It's terrifying.
I find that to be like a real life horror story. You
Right.
make a horror movie of that, and I can't think of almost anything more horrible than that.
Yeah,
The
our
Betty and
research-
Barney, the Betty and Barney story with hearing Barney and that regression therapy and his screams,
Yeah.
like that chilled me to the bone because to hear a
Mhm.
grown man in his mid 30s, late 30s screaming like that,
Yeah.
it just to me, it's that had to be a true story.
Yeah,
What's your
he's
thoughts on that
not-
Betty and Barney?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just like the Fire in the Sky movie, the first time I saw that,
Mhm.
which happened in the 70s, it was terrifying. It was chilling.
And when the guy
Right.
came back, he was tweaked for a while.
And he didn't even
Mhm.
come back for what, 5 days?
Yeah,
He was
gone.
Travis
yeah.
Welton?
Exactly.
Was it
And-
only 5? I thought it was longer.
I thought it was 5, but maybe I'm
I think it was-
misremembering.
I might be
It was-
misremembering
It
that.
was slightly under a week.
Yeah, believe me,
Okay.
that's
It's right, about 5 days, yeah.
many
Okay.
facts in my head from the
Right.
But it's
Yeah.
also too like the whole thing, how much cow blood and cow intestines and cow ovaries and cow eyes would a spacefaring race that's just visiting, just flying by, how much of that stuff would they need? Why would they have to exsanguinate all the cows and other
Right.
domesticated animals too? It's not
Sheep.
just cows. Cows are just the most famous, but it's all the domesticated animals. And they always take the blood and the sky-facing eye, and it's cauterized as they take it out.
Yeah.
It's mechanically done.
We think it's we think they don't actually levitate the cows up into the ships. Because
Right.
Otherwise, if you wanted the eye, why not take both eyes then? Just that the cow dies, lays flat, the sky facing only the sky facing eye is taken. So I think it's some sort of robotic machine
Right.
that they send down to suck all
Oh.
the blood out and carve out the organs that they want and move on to the next cow.
That makes so much sense though. Because if
You know,
it's
and,
like
you know-
the whole thing, why wouldn't you take everything versus just
Everything.
half, right?
Yeah, exactly. We're saying
And-
exactly.
What's your theories on Skinwalker Ranch?
Yeah, we think there's a base. We've mentioned that we think there's a lot of these underground
Mhm.
bases, right, around
Right.
the world.
Cities, bases, yeah, outposts.
You know of a few of them, and I think one of them is next to Skinwalker Ranch, the ridge.
Yep, they use it.
northwest. There frequently seem to be over it. And one of the things I saw early on in that show, I think it was day 2 of the show or something.
Mm-hmm.
They showed a picture of that ridge suddenly being lit up like
Oh,
It's
I
a
remember
mansion.
that.
God's biggest flashlight,
Bluish light again.
a
Yep.
bluish white light.
mm-hmm.
And what I think they do with these bases is they have these duck blind things where they can hide the door that
Right.
goes in and out of these things. And they're on the sides of mesas and mountains and ridges. And for instance, at the Archuleta Mesa next to this is the Dulce New
Dolce. Mhm.
Mhm.
Mexico Bay.
underground base there. The Native Americans in the area, they say they see this mesa open up like a big white window opens up on the side of the mesa, and these UFOs fly in and out, and then
Closes
it
up.
closes back up again. And the guy, the researcher named Ben Hansen, who was there at the mesa talking
love
to these
Ben
Native
Hansen.
Americans, I love him.
I've
Mhm.
met him by the way.
He's,
I
such a-
signed we signed one of our books and gave it to him at
No way.
Contact on the depth.
fans of his, yeah. And
That's
so
he's
cool.
there. I think he's a hunk. What can I say?
Yes, and he's a great researcher too.
And so he was there at this mesa, right? And he has an infrared camera that can read heat signatures, right? So
Mhm.
he runs this heat camera up across the mesa, and it's like cold rock, right where the window is supposed to have opened up, hot. There's like these big heat
Yep.
signatures coming off of the thing, right?
Right.
So the way they described this window opening up and this light spilling out, that's reminded me of what we saw at the Skinwalker Ranch. This window just opens up, and an enormous amount of light spills out of the underground, under mesa or ridge base, and then sure enough, UFO lights are seen flying in and out of the thing, and then zoop, it closes back up and it goes black.
Yeah, the Modoc Indians around Mount Shasta have recounted the same kind of thing,
Yeah.
like the duck blind thing with Mount Shasta,
Mhm.
Right.
where a part of the mountain opens up.
A
that-
door opens up
Yeah,
on the side.
and again, they have a different viewpoint.
creepy.
They're our Star Brothers, they're the Anunnaki. They're not afraid of them. They just say they're part of nature. Just like they call Bigfoot the man of the mountains. They have the word from the man of the mountains. You don't go up to the mountains because that's the territory of the man of the mountains. In fact, we know that Bigfoot is real.
The genome has been
The
discovered.
genome's been discovered, and it's been discovered in Oregon and
And what we should say is
I knew he was real.
there's an unknown primate.
Okay.
Genetic strand of an unknown primate has been isolated. And unless there's some marmoset there that we've missed, then no, I guess Bigfoot is real.
They're doing this called environmental tracking.
Yeah, environmental archaeology, where they take water samples in the creeks and
and they go ahead and test for any DNA that's been there.
That is so cool.
Plus, there have been hairs found too.
Yeah, this one guy. They got some of the DNA from this hair strand. That this man walked outside of his cabin and turned the corner, and there's Bigfoot. Bigfoot's.
They're both very surprised.
And Bigfoot.
Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah,
I love that movie.
The side of I know it's a good film. But this Bigfoot crashed into the side of his cabin and left a big old tuft of hair.
Oh.
And so he could immediately say, yes, this hair came from that Bigfoot
creature.
Yeah. So they created this genome between what they found in the water and also in this hair. They managed to cobble together a complete genetic.
Wow.
See, and that's how having these podcast shows and YouTube coming together, all of us sharing stories and research and evidence. This is how we're going to get answers. But to some closing thoughts as far as you, Stephen and Leslie, for a person that is a diehard skeptic, what do you say to people that not come after you, but just in a conversation? What's the main things you try to point out to them?
What I try and find out to start with is I try to ask them the question back. Why do you think that? Do you think that because you've never seen a UFO, that therefore you've never seen one, that it can't be real, or that you've never, let's say, some people I've talked to, they can't remember their dreams. I'm a very vivid dreamer. In fact, I've astral projected so many times, I can't even and so if you haven't had these experiences, or you didn't grow up in a family like myself, you can some sympathy that they don't have the experience. So listen, I can just tell you from my experiences and what I see and what the evidence shows me. Now, I'm a very fact-driven person, and the facts show me that when you find DNA that cannot be explained, and you have pictures that cannot be debunked, and you start to follow the chain of things, and also too, like monuments like Sacsayhuaman, Pumapunku, things that cannot be explained. Then they say, okay, if you look at these things and you really look at the open mind, and you still come back and say, oh, I don't believe it, then so be it. But you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Of course.
I would send them, as a start, I guess I would send them to the Luis Elizondo article in the New York Times. And from that, first read that, and then look at the 3 videos from start to finish. They're definitely showing real UFOs. The videos are taken by our most powerful radar systems.
Our military.
Right.
And infrared, and showing these craft are for real and do exist. And the government, right after Luis Elizondo released this, it was in 2017, I believe.
2017.
He was head of the ATIP program, which is the one that was in charge of UFO research at the time.
Now it's zero.
And they do this. They close down, like Project Blue Book. They close it down and they say, "Oh, it's over. We're not researching it anymore." But what they really did is just open another one.
Exactly. Right.
Fund that differently. So
yeah, I think you're really stupid.
It was ATIP at the time. Yeah, it kept us off their track for a while.
And I really like that George Knapp and Jeremy Corbell that came out, because George Knapp, I got to give him credit for him sticking
hard
to
a long time,
exactly. Just like you guys have been doing this, you said for 40 years.
I got to get on George Knapp's show, but
he's too big a name for us.
You will get there. You will get there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Courtney, do you have any last questions to ask Stephen and Leslie?
This is out of pocket, but does your sister do podcasts? And if so, can you give her our information?
Yeah, she would.
Well, you know what? She and her husband were on the Howard Hughes show in Great Britain.
Oh, cool.
She's one of the big
guys.
guys. Definitely we can send her information.
Yeah, obviously no promises, but we love obviously having guests on the show, and if she wants to come on, I'm sure
she does
grab her.
podcast. She does podcasts.
Yeah, they're so interesting. They were just at Mary Queen of Scots Castle.
Oh my
So
gosh, I would
cool.
love to visit
There
that.
are so many places
The
over
Tower
there that
of
I would
London.
love to investigate. I've been to the Tower of London, but I would just love to get her perspective and talk about some of her experiences over there. Because I feel like if you're going to be a paranormal investigator, being one over in the United Kingdom where everything is so old would be so cool.
Yeah,
But
Scottish
yeah.
pencils.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, her name is Karen Sinclair. So let's look for that.
Awesome.
We'll send it to you.
And
Thank
just
you so much.
closing thoughts for you. Is there anything that you would like to close with? Anything that you'd like to let our listeners know, or anybody that wants to research? Or
I would suggest that skeptics read our book.
yes,
Yeah.
It actually is a good book. For many UFO books, they assume that you must know a lot about it because you're interested in this field. But what we did with our book, the first chapter is essentially a quick overview of UFO activity in the U.S. for 80 years, focusing mostly on mass sightings, because a single person sighting, frequently they could be crazy or mistaken, but when 300 people call the cops and say there's a UFO,
then there's something different.
Then there's
There's
there.
something happening.
And then,
That's what I said. I started reading your book, and to me, it's easy to understand, and you put it in a relatable way that I can understand it.
Yes, we didn't want to write above people's heads. And also, as you saw in the beginning, we're probably going to do we're going to do a re-release with more of the stories and make that chapter 1 and flesh it out a bit more.
Yeah, and also the UFO investigation is a non-stop ongoing thing, and so there's new reports to release as well. And also we wanted to make that correction about it's not the Hiawatha asteroid impact crater, younger Dryas comet.
Yeah, like I say, it still was Colonel Mustard with the knife, but he wasn't in the kitchen. He was in the.
We'd love to have you again back on whenever you guys find more interesting stories or you want to bring something to tell the world. We'd love to have you on just to get your word out there. And if you know that we will continuously push your book once this part 1 comes out on Friday, then, and of course I'll send you like the audiograms and the advertisement and all that. But we will definitely get
all over our social media.
And we'll send you Karen's contact information.
If you wouldn't mind. All right. I am so happy that you joined us again. This has been a mind-blowing session.
It was nice meeting you too, Courtney.
Yeah, thank you for coming back on. I appreciate being here.
Connect with us on the dark corners of social media. We're lurking on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Check out our Linktree to listen to Studio Sinister, see what's new, and shop our Undead collection, crafted with our own original designs for the paranormal, cryptid, and horror enthusiast in you. Help us reach new listeners by spreading the word. Share your favorite episode, and let's build a community of sinister seekers. Before we go, do us a solid, leave us a rating or review. Crafting these episodes takes so much time and work, and your love and feedback mean the world to Courtney and I. So until next time, Sinister Seekers, stay true.
Stay you.
Stay
sinister.